All right. And finally, symbols and motifs. And you might be asking yourself, what is the difference? And there is a slight difference. A symbol is one item that has a value, it represents something abstract or beyond itself. A motif is a repeated symbol. So if you have something that comes up repeatedly in a story, then it moves beyond being just a symbol into being a motif. And particularly if it is used a little bit differently every time. So the conch in The Lord of the Flies is strictly a symbol. It means the same thing every time we see it. In the short story that you read by Louise Erdrich, The World's Greatest Fisherman, we have the motif of rebirth, but it's presented in many different ways. We have the Easter eggs and the idea of Easter itself, the time that the story is set in, is part of the motif. The Easter eggs. Then we have the character was wearing something called a shell, which connects us to the idea of the eggshells, and so all of those things build to create this really elaborate symbol, and that would be the motif. So some that you should be aware of, if you see them, you should begin to question, or knowing what they mean can add depth to your understanding of the literature. The tree is very frequently associated with life, with knowledge, can also be connected to the idea of immortality. Okay, but if we think back to one of the basic stories of Adam and Eve in the garden, the tree was the tree of knowledge. And that also ties into the idea of the serpent. And the serpent can represent evil, distraction, deception. And as I said before, as you become aware of these archetypes, you're going to see them everywhere, even to the point of movies where you don't think there's meant to be any deeper meaning. I was watching Spider-Man 2 with Dr. Octopus, and as the way the movie was done, the limbs that became his octopus tentacles looked snake-like. And if you watch the movie, they even make a sort of a hissing sound in his head that is very, very serpent-like. And so from that very, just real simple imagery, we're meant to know that these are going to be evil attachments to him, that they're going to draw him into an evil life instead of the very altruistic life that he had lived before that. Okay, water in general is seen as a source of life. It can be something that is cleansing or purifying. The rain that comes down at the end of The Lion King is meant to purify and wash away all of the bad that has happened while Scar was in charge. But then there are some more specific water images as well. A river can be seen as a boundary or a border. So if you are crossing a river, you are entering into new territory. In Greek mythology, you have to cross the river Styx in order to enter the afterlife. Rivers could also be representative of life or of a journey of sorts. You have the sea, and with its vastness and its power, the sea is seen as representing danger. It can also be the idea of chaos in the world, or it can represent eternity or infinity, that idea of something that is never ending. A fountain of water could be the idea of purification. You're going to be purified at a baptismal fountain, or of rebirth. All right, and then we have colors. Many, many colors have meanings, and the Victorians were phenomenal at colors and flowers and what their representations and meanings were. So here are just a few of the real common connections that colors have. Red as the color of blood often symbolizes anger or passion, can also mean violence or sacrifice. Gold is the color of wealth. Okay, so if you have gold or if you are gold, or if gold is associated with you, it's meant to imply that idea of wealth. Green is fertility, green grass, the green of nature. So there's growth in that, and life force in that. Blue is a holiness that comes from being truthful or honest, and so it can also represent the truth. Blue can also indicate a peacefulness or a serenity. White is pure innocence or purity of heart, okay, purity of things. But white can also be a little bit negative, and that white can be sacrifice as well. Black is almost always seen as something negative. It's mystery. Black is our shame. Black can represent death or chaos. All right, numbers have symbolic value as well, and this is the basis of many different, I would mythologies, even religions to a point. We have the idea of 3 as a holy number. It represents spiritual awareness. So anything that is 3 or multiples of 3 is going to have that connection. The number 4, representative of the life cycle, the 4 seasons, and also of life in the sense of the 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And so if you're aware of those, then you would understand that 7 is an incredibly powerful number because it is unifying life and spirit, or earth and spirit, because it's combining 3 and 4. The seasons have specific connections. Spring is often used to signify a rebirth or to suggest something in its infancy or its very, very young youth. Summer is more that middle youth, adolescence. It can also be the sort of the prime of life. The fall is our middle age or our kind of moving towards death, but it can also be a time of great wisdom. And then you have winter, which is the point of the greatest maturity, but is also often connected with the idea of death. And finally, okay, a few more odds and ends here. The desert can signify death, but it's also a place of hopelessness because you're lacking in water, the life force. Desert can also represent a lack of spirituality. And so in the biblical stories where we have Jesus spending 40 days and nights in the desert battling with the temptation, that is a great spiritual battle. And that idea of a desert or of a some sort of a trial over 40 days is something that you will see repeated in literature. The road or a train, or as I mentioned before, a river, can be used to signify a journey. And if you think about the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, the river that Huck and Jim travel is physically it is what takes them on their journey, but the different places where they stop along the river represent different points of growth for them. And so it is representative of their emotional and moral journeys as well. Okay, the quest is often symbolic. The loss of innocence can be a symbolic event where you have a character who must begin to acknowledge the reality of the world. And in Lord of the Flies, we saw the loss of innocence as really the ultimate motif of the whole story. You might have an initiation phase or idea within the story, knowing that a character has to go through certain rites in order to be accepted in society. And then also know that shapes can have meaning as well. The triangle, which represents the idea of the Trinity, the circle, which is perfect unity or can represent perfection or holiness again. And so this is just trying to equate you with some of the most common and the most repeated. As you get into further literature studies, you will find that there are others that you can move deeper with this. But this is a very good overview and presentation And I want you to be aware of these things as you are delving into the remaining literature that you'll be reading for the course.